It's interesting that you talked about like the politicians and the leaders today, because I feel like we select people on the basis of whoever is like more famous, and it's also interesting like the selling point that they have like are actually essentially the same that we that has existed long since ever. So I'm just actually now thinking that this becomes a question of psychology, although because like how we fall for false leaders and all that, so probably that would derail the conversation, so I'll.
And in some senses, we always have, right? So I remember in the 1990s talking to people about in Atok district in Tehsil Phetchabun, talking to peasants, farmers, about politicians. They didn't even know who the prime minister was. They couldn't give you the name of the prime minister. And I said, well, who do you vote for? I vote for whoever Khan Saab tells me to vote for, right? So, it's not like we had a perfect democracy a generation ago and now it's all kharab. There's always problems with this. We haven't invested enough in education to where people.
As an anthropologist, what do you think about democracy? As you mentioned that things have been changing and we humans adapt to new things. Do you think that democracy itself is like a concept that has existed for some time now, and probably it worked better maybe 100 years ago or 50 years ago, but we need to sort of like reimagine the ways of our governance, keeping that in mind, the way we live now?
So democracy, I am committed to democracy. I do think democracy is our kind of the least worst of all the options. But I think democracy coupled with this unrestricted ability to accumulate wealth and control media through your wealth, those don't go together, right? If we have a media that is completely open to purchase by the wealthiest people, then it's going to be difficult to have a fair democracy. If we go back 100 years in the United States, politics were utterly corrupt, right? Tammany Hall, the kind of Louisiana politics, Boston politics, these were utterly corrupt. Chicago was not known for one person, one vote. These were not good examples of democracy. What happened after World War II, something extraordinary happened, and we started to have, I don't want to give too much credit to any one person, but someone like Eisenhower, who recognized the dangers of allowing too much concentration of power in one group of oligarchical hands. And so that got more broken up. And as did people like Teddy Roosevelt also recognized the dangers of monopoly, broke up a lot of these monopolies. And here we have now the tech companies, which are controlling way more than just a tech company, right? Groups like Google and Facebook. And I'm a proper Apple fanboy. I love everything about Apple. But Apple has too much influence on the world. When Apple could actually they could have bailed out Greece many times over in the Greek crisis. That tells you Apple's got too much money, right? There's a problem there. So how do you have a fair democracy when we don't have a fair media, when we don't have a media that can be trusted, when we have a media that all has an agenda? Increasingly in the US, it's appalling how partisan every single one of those news channels is. The UK, and I know everyone's critical of the BBC, but there is something where the BBC is trying to be more balanced. So I'm a believer in the BBC license fee and all of that. And they're not perfect either. But when you have the media moguls who can basically bombard us with information that is partisan, that is biased, how can we then have a good democracy? I mean, frankly, I don't understand how elections have happened. And when I see the polls, in the US, because of the electoral college system, all of these polls are irrelevant. There's only polls that matter about a dozen states, and inside those dozen states, it's a handful of swing constituencies. That's it. That's the only polls that matter. California, it doesn't matter. We know California is going to vote one way. We know Texas is going to vote one way. Forget them. They're irrelevant. What matters is Pennsylvania, Georgia, Ohio, Wisconsin. It's no longer that kind of democracy, if it ever was. It certainly is not a democracy that is reflective of the view of the public. It's a democracy that is manipulated and controlled by very, very rich people. So I don't see how we continue with our democratic institutions without getting on top of that pretty obscene accumulation of wealth in ever fewer hands, while ever more people are left completely outside of that.